From the Gettysburg Museum of History Studios, you're listening to Addressing Gettysburg.
That's what she said.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Addressing Gettysburg's That's What She Said podcast. We are here today to do this kind of live, and I'm not going to lie, I'm a little nervous. Okay. Hi, Veronica. How are you?
You know, it's nothing different than the regular recordings
but Matt's
where we
usually leading me along.
Oh, yeah.
That's what it is. I was waiting for Matt.
I
But
see.
anyway, my name is Bethany Yingling.
And I'm Veronica Bristensky.
Hi, Veronica. How are you?
Good, Bethany. How are you?
I'm good.
Good.
I'm good. I can honestly say that today was the most boring day of my existence.
Why?
Ezra was sick.
Aw.
I tried to work. That's impossible with a sick 3-year-old. So I didn't do it. Now I'm going to have to take 8 hours of PTO.
Oh, no. Aw.
How was your day?
What's Ezra's just like a cold or
I think it was
something?
allergies,
Aw.
but he looked like a hot mess.
Well, little man probably picked something up at preschool or whatever grade he officially started, right?
Yeah,
I mean, it's
preschool.
like a hot petri dish of
Yeah.
disease.
He has a new tribe.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's what
Yeah.
they call it now. A
Okay.
new tribe. It gives you allergies and grossness.
Yeah.
How was your day?
Excellent compared to that. Just a regular day at work, and then I even snuck in a little nap before I was able to get down here.
That's
and
not fair. You can't
I
tell a
know,
mother of
I'm
a
s-
3-year-old
I'm
that.
I'm
What is
sorry.
that?
Hey, I made life decisions, and I'm happy with them. not gonna lie. Don't judge me. A little bit selfish, but you know it's true.
I see how you are. Okay. Well, let's move on then and introduce our guest, Mr. Tim Smith. This is very
Yay.
exciting for us. But I'm going to read your credentials first before we go off on fangirl on you. Okay. So Tim is a licensed battlefield guide. He is the official Adams County historian. He's the director of education at Adams County Historical Society, and he is the Gettysburg consultant for the American Battlefield Trust. And if that is just not enough for all of you people to understand that he's awesome, he's also the author of 12 books and numerous articles on local history and the Battle of Gettysburg. Tim, it's so nice to have you here.
Yes, thank you so much for
thank you.
doing this.
We're going to fangirl out for a little bit. Tim is just really cool. I'm
Let's
excited.
try to get him to blush. You think
Yeah.
we can do it. I don't think we can do it. Actually,
I don't know.
think
I've
that's
never seen it happen.
probably.
Yeah, I've been doing a lot of talking at civil roundtables and stuff over the years, and I do these YouTube videos, and people watch them. And it's interesting that it's not like a lot of local people watch my videos, and it happens to me all the time that I'm at home in the beer garden at the Farnsworth House or at the museum at the Adams County Historical Society, and people are planning a visit to Gettysburg. So they get on the internet and they Google Gettysburg and they see some of my videos, and so they watch my videos, and then they come to Gettysburg, and then there I am.
Just out in the wild.
It's like
A living
it's
legend.
like
right there.
people don't expect it.
No, they think that we keep you in a cage and when
but
you're not
I mean,
on.
you come here and here I am, and then they're like, wow, and they ask me questions and get my photograph, and it's kind of surreal sometimes.
I bet. I had somebody come up to me one day, and I don't think they understand that we all know each other. We see each other.
It's a small town.
At the bank and the grocery store and stuff. I actually did see you at Giant one day, but somebody came up to me, one of our members, and was like, I was at the Farnsworth House and Tim Smith served me a beer. And I was like, okay. I was not appropriately excited. I'm sorry.
Oh man,
But
buzzkill.
yeah, I'm such a horrible person.
Yeah.
Well, the long and short of it is, it's a big deal that you're on with us. So
Yeah.
thank you.
Good. And this is the first time I've been on the Addressing Gettysburg podcast since they moved to their new location here at the Gettysburg Museum of History. So, everything looks the same except it's a different building.
Steady
Probably-
electric, steady
Yeah.
Wi-Fi. That's what
Yeah,
happens
there's
when
air
you
conditioning.
move out of a
Yeah,
shed
air conditioning.
in a parking lot.
So it
No
looks-
bus
it looks-
ambient
it looks very,
noise,
Very,
yeah.
very, very nice.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I mean, I had
Yeah.
nothing to do with
I
it,
just,
but
since
on
the mu-
behalf of Matt, thank you.
Since the museum is opened, I'm just really, really, really busy, and not that I don't want to be on the podcast. It's just I just can't seem to find the time. I know.
Stop
pretty
being
lame.
so popular.
Pretty lame.
Well, so getting to this episode, I'm pretty excited because I think you're going to talk about a person I've never heard of before. Jennifer Wade. I'm not familiar with her. I don't know who this person is. Otherwise known as Jennie Wade. I don't know. I don't know who that
I
is,
think
so.
Well, I mean, pronouncing her name slightly wrong is not a new thing. That's something that's been going on for a long time. I think one of my pet peeves on my list of pet peeves for July 3rd, which hasn't aired yet on our podcasts, is people who spell Jenny with a Y instead of the IE.
Oh, okay. Not even the G thing, just the IE.
I don't mind the
Y.
G or the J thing. It's
okay.
it's the Y that bothers me.
That's fascinating. All right.
it's the small things in life. As I pick up my notebook and I literally spelled it Jenny with a Y. Just put that on the camera real quick. There you go.
And I have mine with the IE. So
Listen, whatever.
I know.
I'm an unschooled hick. What can I say? So let's talk a little bit about this Jennie Wade. Why did you choose to? What is it about her that you chose to do her as your debut?
I don't know exactly how it happened, but of course I've always been into the civilian story of the Battle of Gettysburg, and I've always been interested in, I guess, things that aren't that popular amongst battlefield aficionados. But Jennie Wade, the story has always been interesting to me. And I think it goes back to the first time I came here. I have no idea when it was. I'm going to guess it was 1969, 1970, 1971. It might have been 71. I don't know the year. But my family, every August, got into a station wagon. And my dad drove us somewhere. And we drove like for a week. We drove to Ohio.
This is literally my worst nightmare, Tim.
Yeah. Cousins in Ohio. We would, drive to Pennsylvania. But in the beginning or the ending of those week-long summer trips, he always ended up on Route 30. And it was easy to drive, on our way out on the trip through Gettysburg or drive on the way back through Gettysburg. I always encouraged my family to visit a historic site. Mm-hmm. And looking at the composition of my family, I think I was the only one who
I think that's a common problem.
Visit a historic site. We always went miniature golfing. We had 5 or 6 miniature golf courses. We hit a state park. We would go to like Deep Creek Lake or Ohio Pile, I remember. Mm-hmm. I tried to get my family to go to Fort Necessity. I remember that didn't work too well. Oh, no. But we always, Gettysburg was a way to satisfy me. So if on our way out or our way back we could stop, and see the battlefield, that was fine. And we did. And on this one trip, I don't know if it was our first trip or second trip or third trip, we ate breakfast at the Avenue Restaurant.
Uh-huh.
And
rest in peace.
on Steinway Avenue.
R.I.P.
And we were sitting in the little rounded booth near the window, the front window, and I could look up the hill and see the Jennie Wade house. And they had a rack of brochures, and I got the brochure off the rack, and that was like, a kid that doesn't have any money, that their parents aren't going to buy them a book. There's a brochure rack. And the brochures are free. So I filled up on the brochures, and I read about Jennie Wade and her story from the brochure as I'm looking at her house. Now, there was no way to convince my family to go to the Jennie Wade house.
Aw.
I mean, you think about it, and my father hated Gettysburg. And, years later, after he died, I found, like, his notes of all of our trips. And he has notes from the trip. And he mentions in his notes that he wouldn't go to Gettysburg unless it wasn't for Tim pushing him to go to Gettysburg.
Aww.
And that it's just a big tourist trap and everything costs too much money. So, if you have a family like we did, 4 kids, and 2 adults, 6 people, how much does it cost to go into a single attraction around the town? Mm-hmm. It's a pretty sizable chunk of change. So we never went on an organized battlefield tour. We never went on the bus tour. But I could get them to do things like go to Devil's End because it's free. Yeah. Or or so we were eating at the Avenue restaurant, and that was my engagement with Jennie Wade. Now, again, years later, when I was going through his stuff after he died, in my father's stuff was the brochure
Aw.
that he had saved that I had read that day. And I still have it.
That's pretty neat.
That's adorable.
And so, I've always been interested in her story. And of course, she was the only person from the town to be killed during the fighting.
Mm-hmm.
And, because of that, her story gained a lot of notoriety over the years. And what's interesting about that, the only civilian fatality, is a lot of times people say she's the only civilian casualty.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, that's not true. Like 8 civilians are wounded during the battle. About 10 civilians were taken prisoner by Lee's army when they left. Other civilians died as a direct result of the battle days and weeks later.
Mm-hmm.
And an untold number of civilians died of disease. But Jennie Wade is the only person in the town to be killed during the fighting, the only civilian killed during the fighting. So she's one of about 30 casualties, but she's certainly the most famous and got the most attention. Of course, John Burns is wounded too.
Yeah.
So, but
Tim, do you think that was almost like I don't want to say propaganda because that has negative connotations, but I mean, do you think that her story was used like, here's a patriotic woman making bread for the soldiers and she gave her life for, the Union? I mean, was that the way it was sold
Sure.
back in the 1860s or was...
And I think, well, in some respects,
Okay.
And some people railed against that. But, you have a battle in which 50,000 people were killed or wounded or captured, an untold number of deaths. Let's say 5,000 men died in and around the battle, and, another 5,000 died in the hospitals around the town days and weeks and months afterwards. And it's kind of hard to pick out individual soldiers and talk about their deaths.
Mm-hmm.
And Jennie Wade is a civilian and, theoretically, the only female killed during the battle. Although, you hear these rumors about females dressed as Southern soldiers who were killed in Pickett's charge, which I might add there's no actual proof for. But, that's a possibility. But, it is been used as a human interest story. It's been used as a patriotic woman story. But in point of fact, it was just an accident. But what had happened was right away after the battle, some of the newspapers mentioned the death of Jennie Wade. And when people came to Gettysburg in the weeks and months after the battle, they asked about Jennie Wade. They wanted to know about her. And she became popular. And by late 1863, an article starts to circulate, promoted by the Harrisburg newspapers, that, there should be a monument to Jennie Wade. And the Harrisburg newspaper printed a glowing tribute of Jennie Wade and how she sacrificed herself. Wow. But the Harrisburg newspaper went a little bit far. In the article, there's something about how Jennie Wade was the only sacrifice that the people of Gettysburg made upon the altar of freedom. And instead of it being a heroic female story, it became the men are cowards because they're making a statement about Adams County's position as a anti-war county as opposed to, in a highly democratic county during a period when the state is controlled by the Republicans. So it was more of an anti-Gettysburg statement. So the people in Gettysburg told the people in Harrisburg that they didn't want, keep your money, we don't need a monument. And besides that, Jennie Wade is not the only person that the county sacrificed. There were thousands of men from the area who served in the Civil War armies, and men from Gettysburg and Adams County died in the war.
Yeah.
And I think people resented early on people coming into the town and making a big deal about Jennie Wade. And
With
then they would-
everything else that they had been through.
yeah.
Like almost overlooking that.
Yeah. So I think people began to look at Jennie Wade's story as, okay, you got all these people in the town. Jennie Wade baked bread for the soldiers. Jennie Wade was killed in the fighting. And they held her separate than all the other people in town who cared for wounded soldiers and buried the dead and fed the soldiers during the battle. So locally, there was always a certain amount of resentment that was brewing against the Jennie Wade story itself.
And isn't it funny that that's never stopped?
No, and that has never stopped. And so you have that going on at the same time that the Jennie Wade story really gets going. A lady from Philadelphia in 1864 wrote a poem about Jennie Wade, and it made its rounds through the newspaper. And then the local townspeople would point out to people who came to visit things like, well, you know, she wasn't that heroic. And then they would say she wasn't really baking bread. They would say that, you know, she wasn't a respectable girl in the town. They would make comments about her virtue. And then people would point out, you know, and John Burns is one of those people, that her father was born in Virginia, that her name was really Virginia Wade, and that her sister is Georgia Wade, and that she comes from a family of rebel sympathizers. You know, so there was all kinds of negativity around her story. But it's fascinating to me how the story evolved. And I think it became like one of the most popular human interest stories of the battle. So you're a battlefield tour guide, let's say in the 1880s, and you take people around the battlefield, and the way back into town, you pass the Jennie Wade house. Hey, you know, Jennie Wade was killed here, the only civilian to be killed during the fighting. And, you know, it was a story that became associated with every battlefield tour. And like the rumors about her, you know, persisted, that persisted. And I can tell you, when I was studying to be a battlefield tour guide, and I had, you know, tutors. I think I had some pretty good tutors and mentors in my day, like Jim Klaus, Dave Richards, Charlie Fennell, Wayne Motz.
Wow.
And Wayne Motz, you know, he told me one time I was practicing or running down my tour with him before I became a tour guide, and he said, "Let me give you a piece of advice." You know how he talks.
The Wayne Mott's voice.
And he said that only mention 10 people by name on your tour. And I thought that was a really good piece of advice.
Yeah.
You hear people going way overboard, mentioning names.
Yeah. And it
You know
felt
what?
like they're just like, who?
On my tour, and on my tours with the general tourists, I never talk about Gordon's Brigade. They're Georgians. Or Pettigrew's Brigade. No, they're North Carolinians. So you think about what 10 people are you going to mention? And I remember Wayne's 10 people. Well, I don't know if I can remember them all right now. But, you know, there's like Meade and Lee and Pickett, you know, and of course, there's Jennie Wade.
Yeah. Well, I think any human interest story, you know, the most, the best, the only, the, you know, the whatever, the only female, the only male, the biggest male, the big, you know, like there's all these quantifiers that people are like, oh, the only civilian? Like I could see how that would be a focal point. Like, oh boy, that's a big deal. I'm super fascinated though by you relaying that story of almost immediately the spin on it being like a negative, almost like a jive at the local population, as opposed to, hey, let's just use her as symbolically representative of all the contributions and sacrifice that everybody in Gettysburg made. Give her the name of Jennie Wade, right? That because we have an identity to this person, but it reflects on all of the and it wasn't. It was the total
it's just
opposite of that.
one
It was
person.
like she's the only one.
And it's not like
really
she's the only civilian to ever be killed ever.
Right, yeah.
You know,
yeah.
but I can't name you any other.
Sure you can.
Sure.
I can? Who?
Here at Gettysburg.
No,
or
I mean in
anywhere.
the Civil War.
Oh, in the Civil War?
Civilians?
People ask me this all the time, so I'm more conscious of it than a lot of people.
Who was the
Remember that
How about
you-
Mrs. Henry?
Yeah, Manassas,
on Henry
right.
House Hill?
Yeah.
Oh, well,
If you ever watched the Bloomgren
I didn't know her
miniseries,
name.
there's a scene in the movie where an artillery shell explodes, and she goes flying out the window in her bed. Am I making that up?
I've never seen it.
Oh my God. Oh,
But
that's funny.
see,
Yeah.
there's a difference between Tim Smith with all the credentials that I listed at the beginning of the episode and Bethany Yingling, only credential is that I live here.
And
So
you have a podcast.
I have a podcast, but again, we
bring
haven't
the
talked about
experts
Jennie
in.
Wade.
That's what, yeah.
Yeah, we bring the experts in. This
not
has
the
nothing to
experts.
do with us.
Well, let me give you a couple other pieces of insight in this. Now, we know what happened that people started bad-mouthing Jennie Wade. And then, of course, I think when a lot of people talk about this subject, you quickly get into, well, is it valid or not? Is it true or not? And to me, that's not really the most important thing. The most important thing is, why is it being done? And why is it being started?
Fair.
And, of course, a couple things come to mind. One of them is this this fight between the Republicans and Democrats in the area. And it's the Republican editor of the Star and Banner, John T. McElhenney. And he's really good friends with John Burns. And the two of them really go at Jennie. So John T. McElhenney publishes an article right away and says, hey, Jennie Wade's no hero. And he actually points out the fact that on June 26th, when Jubal Early's forces come into town and Colonel Elijah White's Comanches enter the town, that Jennie Wade marches down to the square of Gettysburg and tells Colonel Elijah White that, hey, that family are black Republicans and they have a son in the Army.
Wow.
And, he accuses her of diming citizens out that are loyal. And in point of fact, what had happened, and this is told from the McClellan family perspective, meaning Jennie Wade's sister, Georgia Wade McClellan, and it's also told to us from Tilly Pierce's point of view. But Jennie Wade's little brother, Sam, was working for Mr. Pierce, Tilly Pierce's mother. Tilly Pierce's father, he's working for. And I think in one of the census records, in the 1860 census, he's actually shown as living with the Pierce family. Also, he's shown as living with the grandfather, too. So he's got, I think, 2 places where he's shown
Dual citizenship within the town.
Yeah. Yeah. But
Republican and Democrat.
at the last moment, Mr. Pierce tries to send Sam Wade, and forgive me for not remembering how old he is. So he's 13, with the Pierce's horses to get them away while the Comanches are coming into town. And Tilly Pierce, she has a pet horse. She goes on and on for pages about this pet horse and her reminiscence of the battle.
How do you feel about that, Tim?
Oh, it just disgusts me. Talk about somebody who should be criticized. But anyway, Mr. Pierce wants to save Tilly's pet horse. So he gives horses to Sam Wade. And here, think about it. Here comes the Confederate Army brandishing firearms, pistols and swords, coming down Baltimore Street, and he sends a 13-year-old boy to try to run from them with the horses. Mm-hmm. He gets up on top of Cemetery Hill. The Southerners fire a few shots at him, and he halts, and he's captured. And they haul Sam Wade with the horses back into the town. Jennie comes out of her sister's house. She just helped her sister give birth to a child, for God's sakes. And what's this? Supposedly it's 3:30 p.m. when the child's delivered. So she comes out, and here's her little brother taken prisoner by the Southern Army. And as far as she knows, they're not releasing him. Mm-hmm. And they march him into the square. And she follows the soldiers with Sam. Well, actually, she has to go back and get her mom. And they have to leave her sister's house, go to the square, and argue with Colonel Elijah White about why, Mary Wade's son and Jennie's brother shouldn't be held hostage by the Southern Army for this rash act by Mr. Pierce. So either on the way to the square or on the way back, Jennie stops across from Tilly Pierce, and she gives her a piece of her mind.
Yeah.
And you can read Tilly Pierce's account of it. And if I say anything, I'd say that Jennie is probably harsher than what Tilly says.
Sure.
Thereby holding our family accountable for what happened to her brother. Of course it's your fault.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think I'd be pissed too.
So Tim, we're kind of, I realize right now I don't know how long into this,
Oh, I'm
few
sorry.
minutes. No, but we kind of started ass backward, right? We started with this young lady's death, right? So can we just put the brakes on real fast for the listeners that might not know the Jennie Wade story, other than she was killed, she was a civilian killed. Can you kind of back up and just, who was she? Like, tell a little bit of her life story.
Well, I tried, I should preface this by saying that, for a few years now, I've been actively working on a book about Jennie Wade.
Okay.
And I have it on my computer. And I have, 3 major sections of my book. And one is called The Life and Times of Jennie Wade, where I try to dissect what we know about the life of Jennie Wade. And then I have a chapter on the Civil War, the Battle of Gettysburg, and Jennie Wade's death. And then I have a final chapter, which we're talking about right now, the legacy of Jennie Wade, and how we remember her story, how her story's been portrayed over the years, and how we portray it today. And I have some insights on the story that I give that I'm sure, nobody's really that. I haven't read these aspects in anybody else's book. But of course, my strength is being a genealogist and trying to delve information about these families in town. So Jennie Wade and her family are not one of the upper class families in the town. The town has a population of about 2,400 people. Jennie Wade's father was born in Jamestown, near Williamsburg, James City, Virginia.
So a Southern guy.
I guess, a lot of people consider Virginia the Deep South. I always wondered about why people, but he's definitely from Virginia. He's a Southerner. But he moves into this area at some point, and he is an apprentice tailor with the Skelly family for a while in town. We pick him up in the late 1830s, and he is a guy who is kind of in and out of trouble.
Like money trouble or like
No.
other trouble?
Other trouble.
Okay.
He probably drinks a little bit, too much. There's a notice where he rapes a girl by gunpoint.
That's not
And
a little thing.
she has a child by him. And that becomes Jennie's older stepbrother. He ends up being in Elm's house, kind of associated with the family, but kind of not, being bound out to other families. But in a lot of early writings about Jennie Wade where he's mentioned, they mention him as James Wade's child from another marriage.
But it wasn't a marriage.
Raping a girl by gunpoint, I don't know. It doesn't seem like a marriage.
Well, no, but was he convicted of that?
Yes.
Okay.
And the child is raised as his son.
Okay. I didn't know if that was
And
like
I don't know
the
what
story that
happened.
perpetuated later because of who.
I don't know what happened to that girl. I can't figure it out. She may have married, and that's why I can't figure it out. But I have her name in the book and all, in the sources for it. But we know a little bit about him, the son. Then he marries, and when he marries, he and Mary Wade, or his wife, are living in Bendersville, in Manalapan Township, northern Adams County, and he marries a girl named Mary Philby. Now, I should mention in some of the early Jennie Wade stuff, Mary Philby is said to be from York County, but actually, this was York County before
Gotcha.
1800. And her father is from York County. He's from here.
Gotcha.
And Jennie Wade's maternal grandmother is connected to some of the early settlers of the area. And so Jennie Wade's mother is from this area and is one of the earliest, part of her family is amongst the earliest settlers.
I'm so sorry, Tim. So this, we have to watch what words because we get like dinged for YouTube Live. So I'm not going to use
Did
the
I say-
terminology about.
Okay.
But the illegitimate child, right? This
Okay.
happens before he gets married to Mary Philby.
Yes.
Okay. Gotcha.
It happened about a year before he got married.
Okay. All right.
And he
Mary
was
Philby.
convicted.
Well, I think in the records he's shown as not guilty,
Okay.
but the child was acknowledged to be his and raised as his son.
Okay.
So I'm a little, I don't know if there
Gotcha.
was some kind of out of court agreement that he agreed to pay support or for this child. He ended up going to the almshouse and then ended up being bound out to a family. I think it's John James Wade. I'm not looking at all my information I have on it. But then there's an account in the paper where James Wade, while he's living there in Manalapan Township, burns down the stable in Bendersville of a Charles Myers, is arrested, is thrown in jail, and spends time in jail for a few months. And then he ends up getting out of jail, but then he beats someone up and he's thrown back in jail. For a while, he is shown as part of the Temperance Society. It looks like he turned his life around. He's an officer in the Adams Temperance Society when they have meetings. He becomes a captain in a local militia unit. And, he in the newspaper actually has notices where his company is getting together. So there's some respectability. In the early 1840s, he opens up a tailor shop in town on his own, and he seems to be doing well. But then there are several more arrests for assault and battery, basically. He spends some more time in jail. And then, of course, in 1850, he supposedly finds a wallet. There's an inference here that he stole the wallet, and it has a couple $100 in it. He flees town. The sheriff and he takes some law enforcement officers with him, and they capture him in Washington, D.C. with this money that he had found from someone's wallet who dropped it on the street, supposedly. Maybe he stole it, maybe, but he's actually sent to the Eastern State Penitentiary in Philadelphia. And while he's there, just before he's released, his wife has him declared insane. And so when he's released, he ends up spending time the rest of his life at the Adams County almshouse. But obviously, there are conjugal visits because they have children after that.
Oh, after that. Wow. Okay. I was thinking maybe they were.
This is so totally different
Wow-y,
than
yeah.
everything I have ever been told, heard, or know about the Jennie Wade's dad.
And, I spend quite a lot of time looking into the court records to find information about him. Now, let me just point out something, getting back to John T. McElhenney and John Burns. Yeah. So while James Wade is, enemy, of the town and is causing all these problems, who might be one of the law enforcement officers and, know a lot about this. Of course, his terms as constable didn't really start until the 1850s after he's already in jail or at the almshouse. But obviously John Burns might be well acquainted with Jennie Wade's father.
Yeah.
And, that might lead to some of his opinions of that family. But so they lose their father in an early age is the important part to know about the story. Mary Wade, and I'm not exactly sure where she got the money in the early 1850s, purchases a small house on Breckenridge Street, and her and the family live there. And, Jennie, we're going to call her Jennie for now, and her sister Georgia, they make ends meet and they get jobs. And I can tell you, reading some of this stuff, women having jobs is really frowned upon at that time. So, but they're scraping together a living. Mary Wade works as a seamstress and her daughter's helper, and they're able to have a small house on Breckenridge Street.
Do you know what her job was?
Seamstress.
Okay.
So, and it seems as if they're working, at least partly, Mary Wade works for Johnston H. Skelly Taylor, who, of course, has a son named Johnston H. Skelly Jr., who eventually will be Jennie Wade's boyfriend. And so there's a lot of negativity about this family, and their father is in trouble with the law. And when you read the negativity about the family early, maybe they say Jennie is outspoken.
Well, obviously, if she dresses down Tilly Pierce on the street.
Yeah, she says things maybe that other people don't appreciate. I know that one of the negative articles about her, there was an interview by a local, said that Jennie supported the South and was always talking about states' rights. I seriously doubt that.
Yeah.
The one thing about Jennie being a Southern sympathizer that's ridiculous to me is two of Jennie Wade's brothers will serve in the Union Army. Her stepbrother and her brother. One of her brothers is in the 26th Pennsylvania the Robert Bell's Adams County Cavalry, and on June 26th is fleeing town because of the Confederate forces entering town. So, and her boyfriend is in the Union Army. Yeah. I mean, I don't really see her as a Southern sympathizer, but people like to make that connection.
Like people today or people back then?
Both.
Both.
Yeah. I mean, I run into people all the time.
Yeah.
Where they're like, "Oh, you like Jennie Wade, huh? Well, let me tell you about her."
Yeah.
And
she
they have
has
opinions.
the worst reputation for somebody who died so young and has been dead for 160 years.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look at General Reynolds. General Reynolds is said to be a great general. General Reynolds is given credit for things he would have done had he not died.
True.
Do you ever think about that? And so Jennie Wade just thinks she's given credit for things that she might have done had she survived in a negative fashion.
Yeah.
But, we have no proof of the accusations that are made about Jennie Wade by people.
Now, do we have a birth date for her, though?
It's, I didn't think you were going to ask me that, but off the top of my head, it's May 21st. I think it's May 21st. You can always get on here and correct me in the comments.
Oh, this makes so much sense, guys. She was a Gemini.
1843.
Yep.
1843. Because she's 20 years old at the time of the battle. I'd have to look on my notes here. Is it May 21st or May 22nd? Somebody Google it. Okay.
Our listeners are pretty good about helping out, so we'll get an answer here shortly.
I'm sure I have it right here. I could.
So before the battle happens, she has a boyfriend. Her dad's in an almshouse.
And he would eventually.
Matt from the back.
Very good,
May
Matt.
21st.
Thank you. May 21st. So
she just turned
in the
20.
1860 census, James Wade is listed as in the almshouse, and he's listed as very insane. And we know also from an account that someone gave of the almshouse conditions that they literally have cells in the basement of the almshouse, and people are chained to the wall, and people have chains and balls like around their legs. And
I'd be insane after that too.
Yeah.
And in the 1870 census, he's insane. And oddly enough, his Mary Wade's father, Jennie's grandfather, Samuel Philby, he's also listed as being insane. So I don't know if that runs in the family. I would just say this about it. She is a girl who grew up in a troubled family and must have had great difficulties. Now, you probably know, some of the listeners, that there were letters written by Jennie Wade to her boyfriend Jack Skelly while he's in the Army that have come to light in like the last 10 years. And I've read them carefully. The original letters are in the Gettysburg Museum of History here, and you can read them. People made transcripts of them, some of which are accurate, some of which are not the greatest, but he's got the original letters, and you can read them. But there's, in 1862, Jennie Wade's mother is trying to force her into marriage that she doesn't want. It's obvious in one of the letters that she flees the house because her mother is beating her.
Oh, wow.
Marriage with who, does she say?
A guy that her mother had picked for her, who was a member of the 165th Pennsylvania Drafted Militia. And then she gets angry because it seems like after that didn't work out, her mother starts to kind of date this guy. So what I'm describing is kind of a troubled family. And so, you know, when people look into the story and they find things like this, it just reinforces
Perpetuates.
the idea that, you know, that the girl has some problems.
Now, it's interesting to me that the Jennie Wade that I was taught about, her dad was poor and had no money. And I remember the story about the lost wallet and that he was put into the almshouse for debt.
Yeah.
None of this other stuff I've ever heard before. So this is fascinating to me, and how just the stories get skewed depending on where you are learning things from.
Yeah, I think it's true. You know, and looking back at historical figures, you know, when I read about them, I think this is part of the issue with writers when they write about people. I think you write a book about somebody because you like them, or you write a book about somebody because you hate them. And it's kind of hard to find a middle ground. But the people who I write about, they don't have to be heroes or anything like that. And I kind of like John Burns and the fact that he is not like, you know, that there's some bad things about him, that you know, he comes with baggage, and that he still went out and fought in the battle, you know, and so you know, finding things that somebody is from a broken family or a difficult family situation, it makes the people more real to me than
Definitely
these built up characters. And I think people who have written about you know, Jennie Wade over the years, all the different things, you know, you're trying to promote her as you know, a female that was killed while she's heroically baking bread for the soldiers. You don't want to interject like any kind of negativity into it. I'm just doing this because my book's going to be like 200 pages long, you know, and I have room for it. And it's important because, you know, after the battle, when visitors are coming into the town and Jennie Wade's getting all this notoriety on a national level, and people are asking questions of the townspeople reaction is like, Jennie Wade, really?
of all people.
Really? You know? It's just a negative reaction also because nobody is talking about the hundreds of girls in town who cared for wounded soldiers, or, you know, Elizabeth Thorne that buried the dead, or girls that, you know, made meals for the soldiers prior to the battle and during the fighting and fed the wounded. So, you know, they're only want to know about this one girl, and she got accidentally killed. But she was baking bread for the soldiers. There's no doubt about it. There's several accounts that you know, clearly indicate that. John Rupp's letter. I'm sure you remember Rupp's letter.
Never heard of him.
Yeah. He says, you know, that Mary Wade, or whatever he calls her now, Virginia Wade, she's baking bread or she's preparing bread in the house that Ellen Freiberger used to live.
Yeah.
And I know who Ellen Freiberger, I know she lived there too. I have all that in my stuff.
Yeah.
But, and then we have this great affidavit given by when Mary Wade, Jennie's mother, was applying for a pension because her daughter was killed in the service of her country. And she does end up getting a pension
Oh,
by the
wow.
government. But there's a report there, and it has some interviews, and one of them is from one of the guys who helped exhume Jennie's body out of the grave near her house when they were moving it to a cemetery. And he said she still had flour on her hands, which I thought was really interesting.
Yeah. So let's backtrack and talk about what she's doing during the battle. So soldiers come in.
So the one other thing we should tell you here, that in the letters that have recently been discovered, it's clear that her and Jack Skelly, who's in the 87th Pennsylvania at the time of the Battle of Winchester, are boyfriend and girlfriend. And I think that's kind of cool because we used to speculate, on the few sources we had about their relationship and how strong their relationship was. But more and more evidence is coming to light that, yes, in fact, Jennie Wade and Jack Skelly are boyfriend and girlfriend. Whether they're secretly engaged or not, I did air quotes for the people listening, we'll never know because it's a secret.
Right.
But that's the other important thing I wanted to mention. And in the letters that Jennie writes to Jack, she's in love with him, and she tells him that several times. So, and she's hoping to get married at some point.
There are letters that exist from both parties, or just from her to him.
We do have, I think, let's see, we have letters from Jennie to Jack. We have letters from Jack to his mother.
Oh, okay.
Talking about Jennie.
Okay.
That's another.
In a complimentary, I love her fashion.
No. Well, yes. I would say when I read the one letter that specifically we're talking about, Jennie's mother is trying to set her up with these different guys. And also, the 10th New York Cavalry is in town in the winter of 1861-62. And some of these soldiers end up, spending time with the Wade family at their house. And the worst, most egregious thing that Jennie Wade did, according to Jack's mom, is she kept comp late.
Oh.
She had company at her house at a late hour. So whatever you want to make of that, that is the absolute worst evidence we have.
But there were other women in that house, too.
Yeah, that Jennie is playing around. And so Jack's mother, would like to break up that relationship. But Jack tells her no. And he says in that letter, if you had a problem with me going to Jennie's house and hanging out with her, you should have said something
Well
early
before
on.
now.
And I don't trust that what you're saying is true. And then this is where he makes the comment, I don't trust the people in Gettysburg past a worthless set of dogs.
Wow.
And so, you get the feeling, the thing I'm getting at is he defends Jennie to his mother. So.
In terms of the Skelly family at this time, are they like in an upper echelon compared to the Wades, or same footing, or
It's odd because they seem to be at one point, but they had a lot of children. And there are renters in the town where the Wade family own their own house. And you think that's got to say something. But the Skelly family rents a house at the time of the battle on West Middle Street. And I would say they were your average family in town. And Jack Skelly's father, Johnson H. Skelly Sr., is a tailor.
Okay.
But
I just was wondering if maybe mom thought he could do better, so to speak, or something,
Yeah.
or like what the motivation to break that relationship up
Yeah.
was.
Maybe she has a person that she wants him to be involved with, too.
Yeah.
But all this is interesting, but I'm just wanted to say before we talk about their situation during the battle that the story of Jack Skelly and Jennie Wade being boyfriend-girlfriend is pretty solid when we come into the evidence. And also, I should say the evidence for Jennie Wade being having a loose reputation, that's not very good evidence for that. But when I was a kid, that was prevalent. And,
Oh, yeah.
Cindy Small, who wrote, a book on Jennie Wade, and we're pretty good friends, and we talk about Jennie Wade all the time. We have common stories where early on we let people know our opinion about Jennie Wade, and we thought that other people's opinions of Jennie Wade would be based on like the written evidence, that we're looking at.
It's gossip.
And I've had people say things to me, and I'm like, wow. And I don't want to say it exactly how she put it because I don't want you to get in trouble with the podcast. But I had a lady who was like the most respected member of the Adams County Historical Society, pretty high up in our historical society circles. And one day we were talking, her grandfather was a famous battlefield tour guide. And she had heard stories from her father that related to by her grandfather, who absolutely knew Jennie Wade.
Wow.
And this lady, she was like 90 or something. And we were talking about it, and I mentioned Jennie Wade, and she said, Jennie Wade! Jennie Wade! And she just said something that shocked me about, Jennie Wade's reputation. And I was like, I don't know about your source for that. So it's obviously her source for it were the townspeople of Gettysburg, after the battle. That's what they were saying about her, things like this, questioning her.
So, Tim, you would have no way of knowing this, but just yesterday we had Roseanne Zyko from the Licensed Town Guides in, and she was talking about Sally Myers, right? And some of the things she was telling us about, that was even disclosed in Sally's diary, and I don't want to ruin it for our listeners that might be listening to that episode in the future, but almost 180 degrees. I've heard these stories about Jennie, right? And I've always thought Sally was like kind of prim and proper, and it's almost like, there was evidence of multiple, I don't know if it was sexual or whatever, but multiple boyfriends and proposals and trying to, search people down and all this other stuff from Sally's side.
I know.
And this is like mind blowing to me because all that I've ever heard before this was really like Jennie, running from guy to guy and everything. But there's, as you're saying, there's no evidence of that whatsoever.
Just the one. And somebody
really
tried to
wild.
set her up with another guy, and she's like,
no. Yeah. That's really
Yeah,
wild.
I think that it's fascinating now, I'm going to show what she said. So, I don't want to appear if I'm, overly sensitive to women, but definitely when you look back through the historical record, when women are, playing the field or dating multiple guys, there is a seriously more negative connotation attached to them than when a man is doing it.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
well,
It's a feather in their cap. It's
What
a
about
mark on
Daniel
the cap.
Sickles?
Daniel Sickles, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, we always talk about his wife having an affair. How about the hundreds of affairs he was having on her?
Yeah. And
Thank you.
yes.
Take that as
yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Tim.
I had to get my, that's for Jim Hessler, I had to get my anti-Sickles thing. But, so anyway, your question was, so at the outbreak of the Civil War, the men in the community who were of age to serve in the military are in the military. I think I broke it down to like half, because, if you just take the population of the town and you divide it, men and women, and then you divide it from military-aged men, like half of them are in the Army. So there's a lot of men in the Army. And Jennie is corresponding with her boyfriend in the Army. And
Only one. Let's reiterate that. Just one guy.
Sally Myers is corresponding with like 20 guys. So I mean,
Maybe
she could be
19,
corresponding with. She could be
It was
corresponding with multiple
19,
guys.
Tim. Give her some credit.
Yeah. So there's a guy in the 10th New York Cavalry that claims that when he was here in 1862, Jennie Wade was his girlfriend. And in a book he wrote on it, he's kind of upset when she dies later, because the 10th New York is at the battle. Mm-hmm. But he said that, when he says she was his girlfriend, does he mean, he used to attend dances with her and dance? Yeah. But at the outbreak of the battle, when there's lots of different facets of this story we could get into, but on June 26th, Georgia Wade McClellan, Jennie's sister, gives birth to a child. I should mention that in 1862, Georgia married, and she moved out of the house on Breckenridge Street away from Jennie, and they eventually rented a house here in the spring of '63 up on Cemetery Hill that today we call the Jennie Wade House.
But only half the house, right?
That's right. She
Okay.
rents half of the house. It's a duplex, and another family, McLean, occupy the southern half of the house. And as the fighting gets going, intensifies on July 1st, Jennie takes the brothers that she was caring for, and there was another boy that was from another family that Jennie helped care for, and she took them up to the sister's house. Her mother had already gone up to George's house on July 1st because she had a child on June 26th, and Georgia wasn't doing too well from the pregnancy, so she went up to be with her, and Jennie and the rest of the family joined them at the house. So
And
Jennie,
just to remind people, back then, childbirth was not I mean, I'm not saying it's easy now, but it was, 50, I think, I don't know, 50%.
A lot of women-
I had an epidural, so yeah, it was a lot easier than what she went through.
But
So
I
can
think
see.
I've seen statistics upward of either 50% of the children, women, whatever. I mean,
Yeah,
they,
it can be bad.
Yeah, they could pass
Yeah,
away.
they
So
have-
this is not an understatement to say that. I know Matt likes to belittle the family that makes a decision to stay, but if she's really in poor condition, only a couple of days after giving birth, and it was a bad birth or whatever, she's having whatever medical issues, there's an explanation why they might want to be reluctant to move her, or not even unable to move her.
Or have multiple people in the same place
Right.
to have more people to care for her.
Right.
well, let me tell you something I found about the almshouse. Let me see if I can find in my records here. But let me see if I control F almshouse. But when I was doing research, okay, so here it is, and this might surprise you. So, in there's some information that James Wade is in trouble again, and James Wade is not going to be able to renew his lease on a house because he probably didn't pay his rent. So they're kicking him out. And this is how I put it. It's uncertain if Wade was able to renew his lease, but we do know that his wife did not return to the house on April 1st. The records of the almshouse indicate that Mary Wade and her children, Georgiana Wade, I have it in quotes, Mary Virginia Wade, had been residents of the institution since January 18th, 1846. And what happens is, although they appear as paupers, it's not unusual for that time for pregnant women to be confined to the almshouse where the doctors and nurses could care for them. So she's getting ready to have a baby. So they put the pregnant woman in the almshouse where there are women that can help someone deliver a baby. And because she can't leave the children, Jennie and Georgia, alone, they're admitted as patients to the almshouse as well.
Wow.
And so the whole family with the pregnant woman is put in the almshouse because there is someone there to help with the pregnancy. And I found that over and over again in our almshouse records. Women in the town that may be having trouble or suspect they're going to have trouble are entered into the almshouse and give birth there.
That's fascinating. If you fast forward to 63, is there any evidence that there was any doctor or midwife or anything that besides the family that helped Georgia?
It seems like it's Mary Wade. It seems
Okay,
like it's
the
the
mom.
mother.
Okay.
There's no other evidence of anything else that I was able to find. But maybe there are women that's their profession around town. Helping other women deliver children, midwives. Is it midwives or midwives?
Midwifery.
Okay. Okay.
So I'm sorry.
But-
So you were saying so some of the family's already with Georgia, right?
Because
And
of her child on June 26th.
so that leaves basically Jennie as a newly 20-year-old young lady with a couple young boys
Yeah.
at the house by herself while battle and all chaos and all hell is breaking loose in Gettysburg because At some point, we know that the Confederates overtake the town on July 1st.
Yeah.
So I would anticipate
Yeah, I'd go where
trying
my
to go
mom
with
is.
family, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So she makes her way on July 1st.
On July 1st, according to, a lot of the stories, she takes her key and locks the door on Breckenridge Street for the last time.
Oh.
And of course, that key is going to be placed in her apron. And when after her dead body is, discovered, in her pocket, they find what? Do you remember?
The key.
The key.
Wow.
And a daguerreotype of Jack Skelly, in her apron. So you always see the key. But she brings the people she had up with her, the brothers and that are with them, and a boy named, I think his name is Samuel Brinkerhoff. His name is Brinkerhoff. But the boy that she's caring for, they bring up to Isaac. It's Isaac Brinkerhoff. I said Samuel because
Everybody's named Samuel back then.
yeah, Samuel's our other brother. And we don't know that Sam is with them. That's why I'm sketchy about exactly who's with them in the house. But they take the other kid, I think Harvey Swanwade, they take him up to the house too. And
That's a lot of people in that little basement.
in the house, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, you mean afterwards, yeah. Wow. And then, on the other side of the house, theoretically, there's the McLean family.
Yeah.
They're also there on the other side. So, and they're in that house during the battle. And on July 1st, the Southern Army captured the town. The Union Army retreats up Cemetery Hill. We have account after account after account of Jennie standing out in front of the house with pails of water, filling up canteens or giving a soldier a drink as they retreat back to Cemetery Hill. And the history of the 76th New York, for instance, which was published shortly after the Civil War, actually mentions a girl that was killed beside her pail as the soldiers are retreating through town. And undoubtedly, they heard the story of Jennie Wade being killed. They realized that she was the one who was handing water to them
And
as they
put two
came
and
by
two
the
together.
house, and he associated the two things. And so you see that sometimes in books. Sometimes people totally misinterpret that, and they think it's a different woman. But we have pretty good records of the casualties in the town during the battle, and there's not another woman being killed. But the family goes inside the house. There's heavy fighting around the house on July 2nd, and of course, on July 3rd, there's really heavy fight, sharpshooter action. But on July 2nd, it should be noted that the Louisiana Tigers charged out of the edge of the town and went up East Cemetery Hill and went right by the side of the house. So that was incredibly heavy fighting that flowed around the house. It's interesting to me, and Matt, like you said, likes to talk about this on his show, that there's ample opportunity for the family to get out of the house or be escorted out of the house. And I spent a lot of time with this in a little chapter I'm working on in this book. And it's funny that I already don't remember things I wrote so well because I've been working on it for too long. But I looked at all the different accounts, and it's clear to me that Elizabeth Thorne is ordered out of her house, out of her cellar, and down to Baltimore Pike. Mm-hmm. At the tavern there, the Battlefield, I always like to call it the Battlefield Hotel, the Wagon Hotel, the Blue Ball family are ordered out of the cellar and ordered out of the town.
Do you remember when those two things happened for Elizabeth Thorne? And
I think they're on July 2nd, the morning of July 2nd.
oh, wow.
And it's obvious that they're going around ordering people out. But there are two houses on this, I guess you'd say the east side of Baltimore Street. One of them is the Conrad Snyder house. And in the Conrad Snyder house, Conrad Snyder had owned the Wagon Hotel, and he died in 1861. His wife and one of his kids remain in the house. And the other kids are sent to the Benner farm on the other side of Rock Creek. They end up going through Confederate lines to get there. But Jennie Wade, there's no evidence that the family was ordered out of the house. And it's odd, it's odd. I mean, they're forcing people to leave the edge of the town because of the heavy fighting that took place on July 2nd. But that family was allowed to stay in the house. And like you say, looking back on it, or, you know, we're looking at it with hindsight, maybe Georgia can't be moved. The one thing is clear is that there's nothing between that house and the edge of the town where the Southern sharpshooters are. And to get to the cellar, because it's a duplex, they have to go out the door facing the town and then go down the cellar facing the town. So I guess the family didn't want to do that. They thought it would be safer to stay in the house. But a violent sharpshooter action erupts on the morning of July 3rd at the edge of the town, where dozens of Southern sharpshooters in the buildings at the edge of the town and fences and trees are firing up at the Union soldiers on the side of Cemetery Hill. And that's something I'd like to highlight in all my discussions with Jennie Wade, is it's been portrayed over the years that a single Southern sharpshooter fired a single shot that accidentally went through the door and struck her. Jennie Wade was killed at the height of a violent sharpshooter action where, you know, dozens, if not hundreds of men were firing at dozens, if not hundreds of other men.
Just read John Rupp's letter. I mean, he
Yeah.
talks about that, about how violent the fighting was and how many bullets there were firing around. So, you know, it was crazy.
You mentioned the Wagon Hotel. I mean, I think there's pretty clear evidence that the Union soldiers were using that as their own sharpshooter nest or whatever. Is there any evidence that they used the McClellan house?
Well, yes. Okay. So, I guess about 5 years ago, I should mention in 1917, a guy named John Wade Johnston from Rochester, New York, wrote a book about Jennie Wade. The true story of Jennie Wade, a Gettysburg Maiden, or Gettysburg Maid, I think it's called.
Being from
Maid.
Rochester, he would have all the information, I'm sure.
Yeah. And his book was based on the reminiscence of Georgia Wade McClellan, Jennie's sister.
Gotcha.
He interviewed her. He spoke to her a bunch of times. He sent her the book when it was done. She loved the book. It sold around town. John Wade Johnson was planning on doing a second edition of it. And about 5 years ago, out of the blue one day, got a phone call from John Wade Johnson's granddaughter,
I love phone calls
who
like
lives
this.
in California. And she told me she had the manuscript for the second edition of the book. I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. And she said, it's different, and it has additions and corrections. I was like, wow, could I get a copy of it? She came here. I made a copy of it, and I sent it, you know, the original back to her. But I have a really nice copy of it. Just all these notes. And one of the notes, one of the things John Wade Johnson was going to correct is a story that Georgia tells in that book, in the second edition, which is never published. And the story is that Union sharpshooters came into the house, were in the attic. The family didn't know it. And these soldiers were firing at Confederate soldiers and drawing fire on the house.
To the house.
And have you heard the story where Jennie's killed? You know, it's 8:30 a.m. A bullet comes through the outside door of the house and then an inside door of the house and hits Jennie in the back and, you know, hits her in the back, goes through her heart. She's killed instantly. And then Georgia, or Jennie's mother, tells Georgia, you know, Georgia, your sister is dead. And Georgia screams, and soldiers burst into the house. Yeah. Georgia says soldiers came from upstairs, downstairs. And she also says in this, again, you have to take my word for it without seeing it, this second edition of the book that was never printed. She's got a piece of paper in there signed by her, and she says that General Howard found out about this, and General Howard had these men arrested, and they were court-martialed. Now, of course, I'd love to
find that
some
out,
kind of information in court. Maybe that's not exactly how it happened. But she also says something interesting I never read. Now, Jennie's body is carried upstairs. There's a hole in the wall created by an artillery shell that went through on July 2nd, so the soldiers bust through and make the opening larger. They go through the second floor of the house, and they take Jennie's body down to the basement on the other side of the house, where apparently the other family is hiding. And so they all go into the basement. And Georgia says that while they're in the basement on the evening of July 3rd, General Howard comes into the house, goes into the basement, and prays with the family over Jennie's body. Never heard this in my entire life. No one's ever talked about this. This is not in any sources except that.
And for as pious as he was always portrayed to be, you would think he would have maybe noted something like, "Oh, I was so heartbroken by having a young lady killed in our lines," or like something like very melodramatic. I could see that. That's really wild.
I mean, and to me, people are always asking me things like, "Do you think that's true?" Yeah. I don't even care if it's true. I have a source for it.
Yeah.
So sometimes, I use things and I'll qualify them and I'll say, well, then I'll explain where they came from. But there's a lot of conflicting information in the Jennie Wade story. Just take her name. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We were just talking about the name, so I guess it's a good time to talk about it. Yeah. Jennie Wade. Her name, according to the baptismal record in the Trinity Reformed Church, is Mary Virginia Wade. Mm-hmm. There's no doubt about it. Now, in 1922, when George is interviewed at a plaque it was a dedication of a plaque that was placed on the birthplace of Jennie Wade on Baltimore Street, where her father and the family had rented it at that time. She said that her name was Jennie Wade, a shortening of Virginia, and that Jennie was a mistake that was made by a newspaper reporter after the battle, and it stuck. And confirming that this is likely, or at least, in this story, is that in 1910, there's a monument placed on Jennie Wade's grave in 1901 by the Women's Relief Corps of Iowa, of which Georgia Wade McCollum was a prominent member. In 1910, she had a bronze plaque put on the base of Jennie Wade's memorial saying, Mary Virginia Wade, so that people would know that that's her actual name. But when I look back at these letters now,
I was going to say the letters.
Yeah.
Jack calls her Jennie with a J in his letters. And I've had people say to me, well, you know what? How about if he's not talking about Jennie Wade? How about if you're talking about another girl named Jennie?
How about if they're forged letters? And somebody thought they were being real slick, and they were like, oh, they don't know.
So
oh, my gosh.
The new letters that we have that are on display at the Gettysburg Museum of History, she signs them. Mm-hmm. And guess what? This is my analysis. Early on, she signs them Virginia. She writes Virginia. A couple letters, she writes Jennie with a G. But she writes on a couple of letters, Jennie with a J.
That's wild. Yeah.
I'm going to guess, because this is all massive speculation, I'm going to guess that Jennie with a J is Jack's name for Jennie. And that she ends up,
like a pet name.
Yeah, she ends up adopting the J instead. Now think about this. Let me hear you guys say.
Maybe the psychosis went down and through her, and she had multiple personalities.
There you go. She was different.
The woman formerly known as Jennie.
Well, here, say this now. Say Jennie.
Jennie.
And say Jennie.
Jennie.
You say them together.
Jennie.
Jennie.
Jennie, 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 Jennie.
Jennie.
There is not much difference between the two. How do we know that he might not even have known that her name was Jennie? The way she said it, he might have been like, Jennie? Yeah. Jennie?
Or he couldn't spell.
But if she was signing it Virginia in the beginning,
but think about how many times you've typed an email and somebody.
You don't read the name?
Yeah, and then
it?
I have this problem a lot.
Okay.
Somebody will say, I will clearly say at the bottom of my email, Bethany.
Okay, yeah.
And then they respond back, "Hey, Brittany, blah, 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 blah."
Yeah. Well, I get that too. Vanessa or Valerie or what? Yeah, I get that. Yeah.
Like that, these things
But I
can
mean,
happen.
Has a boyfriend ever called you the wrong name?
Or maybe it's his.
If Mark ever calls me the wrong name,
isn't
believe
just
me,
some
you'll be
random-
hearing about it.
It's fascinating. That's really wild.
I am also fascinated with the story of Jennie Wade because of the historiography of it. Because she became so famous, there are plenty of things written about her, and there are plenty of things too that you can test. Some of the stuff is just ridiculous that's been written, and then other things are more complicated. Like, for instance, the story of Jack and Jennie, talking about it. So Jack Skelly is wounded at the Battle of Winchester on the morning of June 15th, 1863. We know it's at a place called Stevenson's Depot. We know that the 87th Pennsylvania fought against the 2nd Virginia Infantry. In 1913, there was a guy from Pittsburgh who actually interviewed some of the people involved. And he says that after the battle, Wesley Culp of the 2nd Virginia Infantry, who was from Gettysburg or lived in Gettysburg for years, moved south, joined a Southern Infantry unit, is hailed by some of the people that he knows from Gettysburg who were in the 87th. And he goes over and talks to them. They're captured in the battle. And one of them tells him, "Hey, Jack is over there, and he's wounded." So Wesley goes over and talks to him. In the account, it's kind of hard for me to believe, but in the account, Wesley has him taken to a hospital in Winchester, which is like 4 miles away. And then he goes and visits him at that hospital. And, of course, Jack gives Wesley a message to give to his mom. And it's pretty good evidence that Wesley has a message for Jack's mom. Whether the message is simply, "Hey, Jack was wounded in the battle," we don't know. But he goes on the evening of July 1st when the 2nd Virginia of the Stonewall Brigade marched through the town on their way to, out near Brinkerhoff Ridge or out on, their camp near the Lady Farm. He gets permission, goes back down into town and visits his sister. Now, of course, I don't want to mess with your mind too much, but Wesley Culp's sister is married to Sally Meyer's brother.
Right, we did hear that, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, she did say that yesterday.
And they have taken up residence on West Middle Street. Now, this is interesting to me because...
At the farm, the Culp farm.
No.
Oh, okay.
Just in the middle of West Middle Street, down from the courthouse, going west, like on your way to Kenny's. And they
right, the farm's east.
They lived on the south side.
I know where I am.
Of West Middle Street, the first block.
Gotcha.
The Skelly family lives on the north side in the first block. We do not know which house what am I trying to say? Anna called Myers and her new husband live in. But they live somewhere on the south side. And the Skelly family lives on the north side. And so Wesley Culp, he doesn't know where his sister lives. She didn't live there for more than a few weeks.
Yeah, right, because they just got married.
They got married in the spring.
Right?
Yeah.
Maybe they lived there for 2 months.
Wow.
He would have to stop and ask somebody, where does my sister live?
Yeah.
I think people take these pieces of the story for granted.
Yeah.
So they visit, he visits his sister, and he tells his sister he has a message for Jack's mom. But it's late at night, and he wants to deliver it the next day. And then Wesley runs off, gets killed in the fighting for Culp's Hill, or the fighting somewhere east of town. Man, that whole thing is very vague about where he's killed. From the accounts of the unit, probably out near Brinkerhoff Ridge, near Drummer Boy Campground, somewhere near there. Wow. But anyway, this story is pretty well documented that Wesley has a message for Jack's mom. The story that the message is for Jennie Wade is really something that's invented much, much later. And none of the evidence supports this.
That's interesting. And this was just an oral message. There's no letter.
Yeah, there's no letter or anything like that. So people have changed this scenario over the years, and they have Jack giving Wesley a message for Jennie Wade. And then Wesley telling his sister he has a message for Jennie Wade.
Yeah, I have old documentation, like old travel brochures and stuff from like the 60s and 70s, and they talk about that love triangle, the love triangle between, and then I don't know what the
think
love
Wesley loves
triangle
her, though.
is. Yeah, but there's a triangle, and there's love involved.
We should mention there's like 5 novels on the story of Jack, Jennie, and Wesley. And you might read one of those novels if you want to, speculate more. You can just read one of those fictional novels.
Yeah.
But I've read them all.
We'll let you paraphrase for us.
I've read them all. I love them. I love it. But it's fun to read this kind
Hard
of
enough to keep the real
conjecture.
history straight.
Yeah, I don't need the fiction muddling up what's already confused.
I think if I was going to write a novel, about anything, it would be about Jennie, Jack, and Wesley.
If you wrote a novel, people would think it was true. Because you're so
Don't
prolific
people
with
think
your...
novels are true?
True, that is 100% an accurate statement, but you are so well known for your history books that if you came out, you would have to write the word novel would have to be the title.
The title.
This is a novel,
Yeah.
is the title of your novel.
But I think I think if you did a novel on this, it could be converted into a movie. It could be a made-for-TV
could.
movie with all the details that
There
we
you
have
go.
of the story. But here's what I would have. There's one guy, maybe you know him, Bob O'Connor. He wrote a novel about Wesley Culp. And in his novel, William Culp, who was also in the 87th Pennsylvania, was at the Battle of Winchester, but had gotten away with the rest of the unit. In his novel, William Culp returns to Gettysburg and is in the house on West Middle Street on July 1st when Wesley Culp visits the family. And I've read other people suggest that William Culp is in town, comes back through Gettysburg before he goes out and rejoins his unit. I don't know about that. I've looked carefully. I can't find. I think William Culp ends up in Bedford, PA, and flees in that direction and doesn't come back through Gettysburg. But there's this group of people who have written over the years that William Culp does come back through Gettysburg. So why doesn't he tell everybody that Jack's been wounded? I don't know.
Yeah.
But anyway, in his novel, Wesley visits, and there's his brother William. And William won't talk to him. Now, these people who wrote these things don't know it, but William's wife lives on West Middle Street also at the time of the battle with her kids. Oh, wow. Salome Sheeds. Oh. But anyway...
I'm telling you, everybody's intermarried.
Everybody's related. But anyway, I said to him, we were having a serious discussion. I was like, okay. So in his novel, Wesley's killed. He returns to his unit. Wesley's killed on the morning of July 2nd. I said, this is what I want you to do. This is what I would do. Have William sneak through the Confederate lines, go to Meade's headquarters and say, hey, I grew up here. I played around in this area. I know Culp's Hill well. I know the whole area. Send me out there as a scout. And then Meade sends him out there as a scout. And William Culp goes out there as a scout. And on the skirmish line, here comes Wesley. He sees his brother, and William kills his brother.
Mic drop.
I would read that, yeah.
We're totally
Although
off
now I
topic.
know the end of it, so I don't know if I would read that. But
Isn't that a great way
It's a
to
great
have Wesley
way.
And we don't know it's not true.
right.
That is also true.
So anyway, he didn't like my ending, and he did not include that.
That is unfortunate.
So if Bob ever listens,
Bob,
I enjoyed your book very much, Bob.
version 2.
Yeah.
So back to Jennie and her shenanigans.
So here, are you asking a question? or
I
are you
am.
just trying
I'm
to
going to
redirect
ask.
it?
They've been taking
No,
notes
I'm going
now.
to
They're
ask
asking
an
questions.
actual question.
Okay, I
Okay.
wasn't sure if you were just trying
So
to get us back on
she's-
track.
She's killed. Yeah.
I'm just looking at the time. Go ahead.
She's killed. And then what happens to her body? Now, I have never heard any other person say to me she's taken to the neighbor's house version of the basement. And if I were the neighbor, who were the McClellans? McLean's, I'd be pissed that I now have this random dead body in my basement while I'm trying to hide.
Yeah.
So
Now, we have an account from one of the girls of that family who lives until like 1953 or something like that in Baltimore, Maryland. And she actually is the one who donates the clock to the Jennie Wade House Museum that was in that side of the house at the time of the battle, and they still have it on display. But they take her in the cellar, and for like the next 20 hours, the family, stays in the cellar, hunkered down, and, just sits. Jennie's dead body is just there on the bench, and they're just, it's like a visual around her body. And then on the 4th of July, after the Southern Army has retreated from town, the Union Army reoccupied the town. There's still some fighting on the other side of town, on the western and northern edge of it. But they bring Jennie's body up. They dig a grave right where the tour center parking lot is. There's some evidence maybe this grave was placed where the gift shop now is.
Gotcha.
And they bury the body. And Georgia is standing there holding her infant child, and it's her it's her birthday. When is she born? And it's like her 21st birthday.
Oh, no.
I forget, but how old is she? Well, anyway, it's her birthday. They bury Jennie Wade. But
then she's disinterred.
At some point, her body is disinterred from the backyard and buried in the family plot in the Trinity Reformed Cemetery along Stratton Street. That church was on the corner of Stratton and High Street. And Jennie had a little sister that died young and was buried in that cemetery. And so she probably buried where her sister was buried. And then eventually the family gets a plot up in Evergreen Cemetery, and they move her body up to Evergreen Cemetery, and she's given a stone. And then later, a monument is placed on her grave in 1901. Okay. And that monument that honors her baking bread for the soldiers and, being killed in the battle was largely placed there by her sister as a tribute to her sister, also by the Women's Relief Corps of Iowa that she was a leading member of.
Okay.
And that's dedicated in 1901.
Iowa. It just seems like a really random.
Yeah. Georgia and her husband moved away from Gettysburg early on after the Civil War.
And ended up in Iowa.
It ended up in Iowa, yes.
Huh. That's very interesting. And then somehow got all these people in Iowa to,
Jennie Wade was
care
very
about
famous.
my sister.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And then, over the years, since the family is pretty much, the mom, Mary Wade, stays here in Gettysburg until she dies. And the family, brothers and sisters are all over the place. And eventually, the house was a tourist attraction all along. But eventually they open up a museum and a gift shop in part of the house, and it opens formally as a museum in 1901. And today, the Jennie Wade House Museum is the oldest continuously operational tourist attraction in the town, which is fascinating to me.
When did this, I just find it so ridiculous, but this legend about, a woman putting her ring finger through the bullet hole. It's the same as O'Rourke, right? Like, rub his nose for good luck. His head, he got killed.
How was that
Let's see where I first found it.
It was not a love story that had a happy ending. Why would I want to emulate that or get the same kind of luck as that? I don't understand that.
Okay, since you asked,
all right, thank you.
Since you asked, I can give you a rundown on it. But I did research that. I'd found an early article where the same story is being told about the bullet holes in the Farnsworth house.
Huh.
That's interesting. So the rumor, I'm sorry. What is the actual thing?
My understanding is if you go to the Jennie Wade House Museum today, the legend has it that if a woman puts her ring finger through the bullet hole on the exterior door, she'll get a marriage proposal within a year.
And are we sure that it's the same door?
Yes. And I say that based on the fact that it appears, photographs of that door appear in, let's see, let me see. Oh, here it is, finger in the bullet hole. Photographs of that door appear in the 1917 book by John White Johnston. And clearly, when you compare the photograph that he took of the door with the bullet holes in it with the door today, it's the same door.
Okay.
Here's what I say about that. If somebody took the original door off and then sold it and then replaced it with another door, you're telling me they were careful to chisel all the right marks
But that
out
was
of the
in
door.
1917. What if that door from 1917 isn't the real door? I mean,
Yeah, I tend to think it is. But I
Okay.
guess you could argue that.
I mean, I would replace my door.
Yeah, that's a good
Yeah.
point. Were there any seeing as how she was so famous almost instantaneously? I would think the house would be something. Was it pictured around like contemporaneously with the
But
battle?
you can't see
or anything like that?
see the door that carefully in the
Okay.
earliest. But I have a clear picture of it from the 1917 book, and it's the same door there today that was there then. So take it for what it's worth. But I say it's the same door.
Okay.
I think the people who say it's not the same door, they're more conspiracy theorists, and they're
Yeah.
trying to discount. I guess they're trying to discount the idea we can prove where the bullet came from.
Gotcha.
So in 1949, Miss Nellie Virginia Costin of Mesa Verde, California, and her niece paid a visit to Gettysburg. Mrs. Costin was the daughter of John James Wade, Jennie's younger brother, who had
okay.
fled to town on June 26 with the Adams County Cavalry. During their stay, she visited the house and she related stories of the house. Oh, no, wait a minute. I thought that somewhere in this I had that. Let me see. Jeez. Okay, wait a minute. That's not the source. She must have heard the story.
We also
Okay,
need to.
the earliest account I found of it is in 1941. Legend buoyed at Gettysburg Field by girl's letter. So in the 1941 newspaper, and I didn't put it all in here, this story is told for the first time about a woman who's told if she puts her finger in the bullet hole, then she'll be married within a year. And she writes back to this paper saying she poo-pooed the story. She put her finger in the bullet hole, and the next thing you know, she got a boyfriend, and she's engaged, and now she's getting married.
So that's what it took.
Huh.
But I also have, it's a common story for bullet holes, and I have a story about the Farnsworth house, where if you go up to the Farnsworth house and stick your finger in the bullet hole, you're going to get married.
That
It's
is
true.
so wild. That's just, I don't know.
That
it's
is a
just so
wild
goofy
story,
to
and
me,
I
like,
would
yeah.
be like, okay, whatever. But
Anyway.
okay, one more little thing about Jennie Wade and perpetuating rumors. So
Good.
the other one that I hear quite frequently from people who have not been here for a while, but were here when they were younger, and they are about the age of like in their mid 50s. So this is a story I'm attributing to that time period.
Sure.
That the Jennie Wade house moved,
I knew you were going to ask that.
and that it used to sit further back from the road, and that they moved it, and that skews where the bullets came from, because of course it's not in the same spot.
Yeah. Well, when people say that, when people bring up that, I usually know, I know the whole origin of the story, but I usually try to pretend like, I don't know everything about it, and I'm like, okay.
Set the record
And
straight here,
I'll
Tim.
just ask some questions. Okay. You know it has a basement, right?
Yeah.
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 So they moved the basement too?
See, and this is
They
what
dug
I
a new
said.
hole.
This is
They
exactly
moved
what
the
I
house to the
said.
side.
I
They
was
picked
like,
up
why
all
would
the
they do
stones
that?
out of the hole and moved all the stones back into another hole. I mean, it's so preposterous and so ridiculous. It's just, it shouldn't even
Be a story.
No, I understand why you're asking, because everybody asks this. 'Cause
Yes.
They hear it. I think it's probably still told on some ghost tours. But the other thing is, just take a look at the Warren map from 1869.
It's right there.
And it shows where it is, and it's there where it is today. Here's what happened. So I know the guy who really spreaded the story too. But the Holiday Inn was built in 1964. Before the Holiday Inn was built, there were houses from the town that went all the way up the side of the hill to the Jennie Wade house. And at some point, when they purchased the land where the Holiday Inn is, they tore down 3 houses.
Okay.
And people who were coming into town, the Jennie Wade house was there. There was actually another house on the other side of the Jennie Wade house, the Conrad Snyder house, got torn down. And then they tore down these 3 houses where the Holiday Inn is. And for a while, the Jennie Wade house sat up by itself in like a construction zone. And then there was nothing around it until you got to the edge of the town. And I think these people, were like, wait a minute, that house used to be at the edge of the town, and now it's not. Now it's up there by itself because they tore down the other 3 houses that were north of it. And so this story became popular. And then the guy who lived, and when I was a kid, it was called the Blue and Gray Museum. And now it was the Irish Brigade gift shop. And now they sell breakfast.
It's the Mercantile.
The Mercantile, not museum, but Mercantile store.
Yeah. The bees or something.
Okay.
It used to be the Iron Brigade.
Yeah.
Yes, the Irish Brigade.
Irish Brigade, yeah, sorry.
Yeah. That guy lived in the house, told everyone Jennie Wade house used to be set next to that house, and he moved it up the hill. And
so you heard it here, people. That is a bunch of malarkey.
Oh, it's crazy. And then there was a time when the Jennie Wade gift shop, snow got on its roof, and the Jennie Wade gift shop caved in and collapsed. And when that happened, the Gettysburg Times published an article in the paper, and the article said, Jennie Wade, the article was about the Jennie Wade gift shop collapsing. And the article at the end said, oh, by the way, it's not generally known, but the Jennie Wade house was moved. It used to be at the bottom of the hill, and it was moved up here. And then there was a guy who wrote a book about Gettysburg tourism, Jim Weeks.
Yeah.
And in his book, he says that Jennie Wade house is moved and uses that article as a footnote.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And so it's one of those things that just perpetuates itself, and it is utterly ridiculous.
Agreed. Okay. Well, I'm glad that somebody smarter than me agrees with me. Thank you for that, Tim. So is there anything else you want to add about?
Well, I should probably,
Jennie?
I have to go soon here. My meter is run out.
Oh,
but,
no. Uh-oh.
You know how it is in town.
We'll bill it to the show.
Oh, well, it's almost. It's 5 to, I think I said around 5:15. But yeah, I mean, there's lots of things. I think it's little facets about the Jennie Wade story that are really interesting to me, that, you can research each little facet of what happened, how her death occurred, like you said, where the house was, how the story of the negative propaganda associated with Jennie Wade came to light over the years. But there's a couple things about the story that are really solid. She was killed during the battle. She was the only civilian killed in the actual fighting of the battle. And, she did become very famous. And, and we're still finding new information about it. And the newspaper search engines that have come out lately have made it so that I can track down her brothers and sisters. One of them lived in Colorado, and, the nephew of Jennie Wade, George's child, that was born on June 26. He dies in Billings, Montana. And, you can find interviews with all these people about Jennie Wade's life. So I think there's more information today about the life and legacy of Jennie Wade and her death than we had before. Mm-hmm. And then I'm very fascinated currently in the Jennie Wade's genealogy, but that's another.
Yeah, a whole nother podcast. So when's this book going to be done?
Good question. Well, I have lots of books on my computer that
When's
I've never
this
finished.
Particular book gonna be?
Well, I think, I did write a museum, and I try to tell people that the museum that I wrote, that was like writing a book.
Yes.
And I was actually started this one before I I became the main writer for the museum, and then I did that one, and I'm going to return to this and try to get it done here. So I don't know. I'm not a very
5?
I'm not a quick person, so 2025 sounds good.
Okay, well, we won't
We'll
hold
have
you
you
to
back
it.
on so you can tell us about the.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, tell me
The
about
release
what I
100%.
discovered.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me on.
This has been fantastic.
you.
I have learned so much about her that totally dispels everything I thought I knew about her. So that's
Yeah, and
Great.
I tell you, everything I found for the people who ask about this. Jennie was a good girl.
she was good.
It's hard to add anything more than that. So.
Yeah, I think that's a sign off.
Yeah.
If ever there was one. Thank
Tim
you
Smith,
so much,
thank
Tim.
you so very much. And
Well, thank you.
listeners and joiners today on the live stream of YouTube, thank you. This is
Yes.
a nice little treat for us.
Yeah.
Even though it was a surprise last minute that Matt threw in our laps here, I think it was fun.
Yeah, it was fun.
A different dimension to just recording.
Definitely.
So thank you all for the comments and hanging in there with us. And Tim, always a pleasure to have you on. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you.
And
Thank
Bethany.
you. Yay!
Until
Our
next
first
time,
live
sis.
one.
Yeah.
We did it live. I didn't realize that.
Surprise!
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 Okay, it's all right. As long as
You didn't say anything bad. I
yes,
promise.
We didn't get yeah.
Yeah, no alerts.
Got to be careful. How'd you say it?
Right, yeah. No bings.
All right, everyone. Thanks for listening. Bye bye.
Good. Got my Fort McHenry buddy out there.
There you are.
Let's see. I think Libby went to the store. She wanted me to stop at the store.
Four on air. There we are.
I told her I was going to be here until like.
All right. Do you want to hear some questions from people, or do you have time, Tim?
Okay.
Do you have time for questions, Tim?
Time for questions. There's questions.
There's people put questions in the.
My meter. I got to put a couple quarters on my meter.
Oh, you actually are at a meter?
Cam, go put coins in his meter.
Cam, grab some coins from. You get to go on
You have
camera.
quarters, Cam?
He gets to bomb the show.
I'm in this show now.
You have
There's
quarters
Cameron,
on my
very
meter?
happy.
Yeah, my quarters are out of front. It's
I don't
the-
have none on me.
Cam, just take his
that's the other
keys
problem. I got
and
keys in my car. I got quarters in my
drive the
car.
car and park it in the back.
But why are people live when they ask questions?
Yeah.
You write down the questions. I'll be right back.
I
All
got
right.
the questions written down whenever you're ready.
Well,
listen,
he's getting quarters.
ladies, this was very exciting here. People really seem to like this.
Good.
I think you're going to have a successful show, as I've been telling you all along. But the audience reaction has certainly been positive. I did some polls. I really need to train somebody to interact with the audience while we're doing this, because this is a lot of fun. You could do polls, and I did some polls. So let's see what people said here. Okay,
Are we still
while we're
live
waiting.
right now?
Yes, we're still live.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm not going to do this for the hell of it.
Just checking.
All right, I asked the first question is the Jennie Wade story overblown? No, yes, or who? And it breaks down like this. 22% say who, 22% say yes, but 55% say no, the Jennie Wade story is not overblown.
Interesting.
Next question, is Tim Smith way too obsessed with Jennie Wade? Choices are yes, no, and not enough. 9% said not enough. 36% said yes, and 54% said no. Moving along to the next one. Should historians sugarcoat history or tell it like it is so that we don't repeat it? Questions are sugarcoat or tell it like it is. A whopping 88% say tell it like it is, with 11% too afraid of their own shadow. They say sugarcoat.
These are very leading questions, Your Honor.
Yes, I know.
You're like feeding them the answer you want them to say.
I'm fully aware of
Well,
how
what is the pool here? How many people?
Well, each one is, there's, what, how many we got here?
Not
now?
everybody voted, but at times we had over 50 people watching.
Right, we had over 50 at the peak. It's 43 watching right now.
Okay.
Not everyone voted, obviously, like Veronica said. I'll give you, let's see. The last question, 17 voted. This question, I'm coming up here, only 9 voted. Do you think Jennie and Jack were secretly engaged? Yes or no? 33% say no. 66% say yes. I think a lot of people want to believe they were engaged. Should someone, soldiers, the Wades, have tried to get the family out of the godforsaken house? The choices are yes, hard to say, I would have died trying like a man, or no. 5% say no, 11% say I would have died trying like a man. Hard to say, coming in at 35%, and 47% say yes. So it looks like most people, in one way or another, to some degree, agree with me that someone should have tried something. That's 17 people that voted on that one. Where do you think Wes Culp bought the farm? Choices are elsewhere, the Culp farm, or Wolf's Hill. Elsewhere comes in at 23%, Culp farm at 23%, and Wolf's Hill at 53%. 13 people voting there.
Real quick, did anybody go down with Tim to let him back in?
I did.
Okay.
You let him back. He's in the bathroom.
All
okay.
right, thank you. I just wanted to
Good
make sure we
job,
didn't lose
Cam.
our guests.
Good boy.
He's standing outside.
Cam shut the door behind him, and Tim's still standing out there. All right. Is the door the actual door on the Jennie Wade house? Yes or no? 18% say no. 81% say yes. 11 people voting. Ronnie Ronstadt, what do you need?
I missed that during the episode. So did he say that the house stayed in the hands of the family, or I just
didn't
find
say.
it hard to believe
He
that
just
new
said-
owners after decade don't replace the door
The
that
door.
led to a death in
They
the
could
house.
have replaced it and just
Kept
like
it
put it in
somewhere?
the
And kept it?
basement or something. Yeah.
As a souvenir, and then they
Yeah.
That's okay. That's our first question for you, Tim.
Okay, she said I have a few minutes.
Libby's you're on the shore.
Yeah.
Thank you, Libby, for sharing him with us. So my question, real quick. So I might have missed this, and if I did, I apologize. So the door, first
To
off,
the Jennie
obviously-
Wade house.
Obviously, the bullet goes through in July of 1863, and you said the museum opens in 1901. So do you know the lineage of who's in that house, or who has? Does it stay in the McClellan family at all, or why would the new owners not have replaced the door?
Jenny's sister rents the house.
Okay.
It's a rental property owned by John Houck, the same guy who owns Devil's Den.
Okay.
And he lives on Baltimore Street at the time of the battle. And he, in 1867, the south side of the house is sold to the Kitzmillers. I think Jacob and Anna Garlick Kitzmiller.
Oh, wow.
And then somebody else buys the south side of the house, and it changes hands, a number of times. And eventually, the guy, I forget exactly the lineage of it, but, the guy who opens up the museum, his wife's family had owned it, and he opened up the museum. So, it did go through a bunch of hands, and we don't know if the door was always on the house with the bullet hole. I think early on after the battle, it was a tourist attraction. And people were pointing it out, and so they left it in there. Now, maybe it's kind of cold to have a bullet hole in your outside door. Maybe you want to plug it up or something. People often ask about the bullet and how it went through two doors. But clearly, it went through the outside door, but then on the inside door, it went through a very thin part of the door inside one of the insets. I don't know how to describe it, through a panel in the door, and it didn't go through a thick part of the door. And then Jennie, of course, it hit her in the back, and she was, over the dough tray, which, you could write a whole book called The Dough Tray about the dough tray. It's just so complicated.
Dough tray.
Yeah, the dough tray. But
I
wanted to tell you about the door. So about 3 years ago, I'm going to guess it was, I got a call from this guy, and he's writing a book on famous deaths during the Civil War, and he's analyzing the deaths, like Stonewall Jackson's death at Chancellorsville and all the accounts of the death, and he's analyzing it from a forensic point of view. And he has a friend that works at the University of West Virginia that is the head of the forensic department. And he asked me if I knew anybody at the Jennie Wade house. And so he came with a crew, and I arranged it so that they could go to the Jennie Wade house and do a whole examination of where the bullet came from. And he did complete this. He hasn't published anything on it, but this forensics guy determined that the bullet came from a little west of the Baltimore Street, somewhere from down in the vicinity of Rupp's Tannery. and did not exclude the Farnsworth House
What am I going to
as
do?
the site. So, I mean, it's exactly what we thought it would be. Do you know the earliest known account where somebody places the exact position of the bullet is from that 1917 John Wayne Johnson's book, and he says it came from the office of Rupp's Tannery. That's what he said in that book. But
Boom.
right above that is the Farnsworth House. You know, so
See, it's always been the fight between the Rupp House and the Farnsworth
so I mean,
House.
but what I liked about it was, and it was very forensic. He couldn't give you the exact,
Yeah.
but he did pinpoint it. It didn't come from like the Welty House or somewhere on the east side
It's
of the road. It
definitely
definitely came from the west side of
side of the
Baltimore
house.
Street. So I really liked that. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So we have I have one more poll question, then I have some questions that people asked you. The poll question is Tim overdue for an appearance on Ask a Gettysburg Guide? Choices are yes, hell yes, where's he been, and no. 0% said no, 43% said hell yes, where's he been, and a whopping 56% said yes. Tim, I got a question from Aondish on YouTube. He says, would any of the wounded civilians, remember early on in the show you were talking about wounded civilians, would any of them die after the battle from their wounds?
I think I would count him as mortally wounded. You know, Ephraim Whistler was injured when an artillery shell exploded near his house on the Chambersburg Pike. And Ephraim Whistler dies in August of 1863. So he dies of injury received, because his exact wounds are unclear, directly from the battle. One of the wounded civilians, John Minnig, I think, who goes out. It's Captain Henry Minnig of Minnig, he's a lieutenant then of Company K, 1st Pennsylvania Reserves. His brother comes out to visit him on the battlefield, and a bullet hits a rock and hits him in the eye, and he's blinded for life. So,
And there's several directly after the battle, not during the battle. But
yeah, there are
we know
civilians
about
killed
Ella
directly
Frazier
afterwards
and-
of the unexploded ordnance.
Right.
But none of the wounded civilians died of their wounds. They all seem to recover. My favorite story about the wounded civilian is Georgiana Stauffer, and she's a renter. So we think she's wounded in the skirmishing on Baltimore Street. We think she rents from Baltimore Street. But, when you're a renter, there's no real records telling us where you live. Her husband was in Company K, 1st Pennsylvania Reserves, and he's given the day off, after the battle, and he comes into town, and she gives birth to a child 9 months after the Battle of Gettysburg, exactly. So if he's only there that one day and returned to the Army, you can imagine the homecoming.
Right.
Oh, I'm home today. I got wounded in the battle. I think she was shot in the hip. Oh, well, that's nice. Come on, we only have a few hours.
If you're wounded in the hip, you are not doing that.
That's what I say. And then 9 months later, you're delivering a baby. For the next 9 months, you're carrying the baby.
Maybe it was a mere flesh wound.
It was a grazing.
All right, we got another question here. A fellow who calls himself Ghost of Sickles Leg says, since Jennie Wade died a violent death, Tim, have there been any ghost sightings of Jennie?
I think they guarantee you will see a ghost if you go on the Jennie Wade Ghost House tour. I was just looking at the advertisement the other day for it, and they had a mirror. Did you see that advertisement? Mm-hmm. And it was they put a ghostly image in the mirror. Wow. My question would always be with something like that: if there are ghosts in the mirror, how come you don't show us one of the ghosts in the mirror? How come you created a ghostly figure in your mirror and then say, take pictures of the mirror?
It always happens when no one has a camera.
No.
Yes, exactly.
I see. It only, yeah.
And when they do have a camera, it's a low quality camera and you can't make anything out.
Yeah.
Yeah, like
So I would say
Loch
yes.
Ness
I would say
Monster.
that you're guaranteed to see a ghost on the Jennie Wade Ghost House tour.
There you go. 6 questions. Len says, what was the deal with Wesley Culp? Do you think there was a love triangle there with Wes, or since we found those Jennie
telling
Wade
you.
letters, Well, wait. Since we found those Jenny and Jack letters and have more context to their relationship, is the Wesley love triangle blown out of the water, or was there never really a love triangle? Was it just that they were friends?
Yeah, I wouldn't classify it as a love triangle. I don't think there's much evidence for that. What I will say is, Julia Culp ventured southward into the Confederate lines and visited Wesley while he was, in the Army stationed in Northern Virginia. That's what people have suggested. And this is my theory. I don't know if I've espoused this on the podcast before, but my theory is that Jenny went with Julia to visit Wesley in Virginia during the war. And while she was there, she happened upon the commanding general of the Southern Army, Robert
Oh,
E.
my
Lee.
God. Here we go.
And they had sort of a fling.
I thought we were going to get away
Tell it, Tim. Tell it. Ignore her. Keep
without doing this. Go ahead.
And then what happened was Jenny, became pregnant and sent Robert E. Lee a message explaining he was pregnant. And Lee felt that would really be harmful to his reputation as a commanding officer of the Army of Northern Virginia. So he decided to invade Pennsylvania. They captured Gettysburg.
You just hear Matt laughing.
And then he sent sharpshooters to the edge of the town on July 3rd and had her knocked off.
On purpose. It was an entire
because
battle.
she was pregnant with Robert E. Lee's love child.
51,000 casualties because of Robert E. Lee's love child.
Very greedy.
Yeah, prove me wrong.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that. That's one of the things I like about, history is when people have these wild, speculatory comments, and then you're like supposed to prove them wrong.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I have enough problems figuring out what happened.
Yeah.
Not what didn't happen.
Oh, my goodness.
But anyway,
go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I got one more here from Carl Arleth. He says, when was the Jenny Wade statue put in at the Jenny Wade?
Oh, wow. I do somewhere. It's funny. I do somewhere have the exact date. It's by a guy named Zito.
Chuck Zito?
Vino. Oh, I have it. I can't open up my computer again and look. But off the top of my head, I'm going to say it was 1984 or something like that.
Okay.
And prior to that, they had a wax figure Jenny Wade out there. And we have pictures of the sort of wax figure Jenny Wade.
Melting on a hot July day?
Yeah, she probably melted. But they had her out there, and then they took her away, and then they put her back out.
Did she melt from the back first?
Oh.
Oh boy, oh boy.
Yeah. Well, this gets into, we're
She's
talking about
like the
stuff like
Rodney
this.
Dangerfield of Gettysburg.
Yeah,
man.
this
She
gets
gets
into
no
the movie
respect.
Route 30. Do you remember the movie Route 30, the comedy?
Yes.
Yes.
Where one of the stories highlighted was there was a tour guide, and she worked at the Jenny Wade house. Or actually, she was a tour guide like on the battlefield, but every tour she went to the Jenny Wade house and told the Jenny Wade house story. And then she was really upset at the end of her story when somebody would say something negatively about Jenny Wade. And then there's a great scene in it where it really hits close to home, where she's like upset and her car is parked in the Evergreen Cemetery and she's laying on the hood of her car and she's drinking, getting drunk because she's at Jenny Wade's grave. And I was there when they filmed that. I was on the board of Evergreen Cemetery and I was there when they filmed that. And I just thought, wow, that really hits too close.
You were right, by the way. It was added 1984 by sculptor Ivo Zini.
Ivo Zini.
Ivo is his first name.
He also did, and I don't know if it's still there, but he did like a bust of Eisenhower and Lincoln that are in front of the Hall of Presidents building.
Oh.
I think they were moved inside.
Okay, Ivo
But I'm not
Zini.
100% sure.
Yeah.
Picture them being outside.
And I have like a newspaper article about the dedication ceremony. But prior to that was this awful wax representation of Jenny. Yeah.
I have, let's see, Sarah Woodhouse. I'm sorry. Marie Bingaman, excuse me, says, wow, I was so enthralled with the show that I forgot to get on my phone to comment. So there you go. You got a good compliment there. And let's see.
We're getting some love from Jamie Umstad.
I was just going to
Aw,
read.
Jamie.
So Jamie says, will you be providing sidewalk conditions? Sisters before misters. Love you too.
We love you too, Jamie.
Sisters before misters.
Sisters
her.
before misters.
And then there was, and Ghost of Sickles Legs here, kind of proving what I've been saying for a while now. Enjoyable show, and Semi-Sans Matt also a plus. So that's what I've been
That's a
saying.
five.
Everybody's getting sick of me, so maybe we should have you guys do the show from now on. All of them. You could take my schedule over. All right, well, so that's it there, Tim. I'd like to thank everybody for watching,
Thank you so
for
much.
sure.
Yes.
And
And for
again-
the comments, that's very sweet.
Yeah.
I don't know how this stuff works on YouTube, but I think I saw at least a couple folks giving some donations to Addressing
Yeah, I
Gettysburg.
was just going to say Eric Houston did, and the other one, I have to scroll up to find it. I should have written it down. Forgive me. That was a
It
while
won't let me go
ago.
back. Yeah.
Here, Grant. Grant also did. So thank you very much for the super likes there, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for participating in the polls as well.
Sounds like Matt's buying dinner, guys. Thank you so much. We appreciate that.
Yep.
I like this plan.
And I say we go to Montezuma's.
There we go.
Oh, yes, I need tacos.
Very good. All right.
Thank you
Well,
all.
that's it here. Thanks everybody for watching. I'm going to end the stream here.
Thanks
Girls,
so much.
say goodbye.
Bye.